Why was the only woman in sniper school standing alone at the edge of the briefing table, as if she didn't belong there at all? Sergeant could feel the stares, even if no one spoke directly to her. 30 candidates had been selected for this rotation of the Scout Sniper Basic Course at Camp Leatherneck, Afghanistan. 30 hopefuls, and only one of them had ever worked in logistics before. Only one of them had never been tested in combat. Only one of them, her, was already branded a misfit. She adjusted the strap of her pack and set down the heavy case she carried with her. Inside wasn't some piece of cutting-edge gear like the others bragged about. It was older, worn, but precious. Her grandfather's hunting spotting scope. She hadn't carried it for good luck. She carried it because it reminded her of precision, of patience, the only two things that had kept her sane in a career where everyone else had underestimated her. The Afghan wind whipped fine dust across the formation. The sun was already blistering overhead. It should have been just another roll call, another beginning. But she felt it the way some people feel a storm before it breaks. This was going to be harder than anything she'd faced. The names were read out one by one. Confident voices answered back, all men, all posturing like they already belonged here. When the instructor captain finally reached her name, he hesitated. Supply transfer. His tone carried a weight that cut through the heat. Stood, no, sir. Scout sniper candidate. Glanced up, eyes narrowing slightly as if he'd been handed a bad joke. His gaze lingered on her smaller frame, her regulation-issue rifle, her lack of hardened scars. Right, he said. Just one word, but it held dismissal. She had heard that tone before, 1,000 times. She would hear it again. The first day's briefing made the stakes mercilessly clear. Only 30% would graduate. Less than 1 in 3. Failure meant immediate return to their units. The motto painted on the barracks wall made sure no one forgot. The only easy day was yesterday. But wasn't here for mottos. She was here for something harder to explain, even to herself. Her place among them was questioned before the training even began. Who let admin come to sniper school? One of them muttered. Reeves, a tall lance corporal with a Georgia drawl sharp enough to cut. He smirked at her across the formation. This ain't mail delivery, sweetheart. The others laughed, not at the joke, at the permission his words gave them. Didn't answer. She didn't need to. Words weren't what she'd brought with her. Instead, she quietly pulled a notebook from her pack. Page after page filled with careful handwriting, ballistic calculations, elevation adjustments, range estimates. Work she'd done alone while others spent nights in the gym or bars. She studied the range flags snapping in the desert wind while the others compared their gear. They laughed louder. She calculated wind drift and thought about how small misjudgments could mean missing a target at 600 meters. That night, while the others swapped stories of firefights and deployments, unpacked in silence, her quarters, a converted storage room, were empty except for her. No roommate, no one to even acknowledge her presence. Through the thin walls she could hear them. Again, his voice never carried quietly. $10 says the paper pusher washes out by the end of the week. Probably only here cause somebody needed to fill a quota. Laughter, a new nickname born and stuck immediately, paper pusher. Set her notebook on her cot. The words at the top of the page were underlined twice, precision with purpose. She wrote it there every day, a reminder that patience wasn't weakness. But even patience can be tested. The first real trial came on the qualification range. 12 firing lanes, targets at distances up to 800 meters. The desert wind churned up small dust devils across the line. Perfect conditions for failure. Shouldered her rifle, calm settling over her like a cloak. This was her space. Not the barracks, not the briefing room, not the jokes whispered behind her back. This was where she belonged. Shooters engaged targets at unknown distances, barked over the loudspeaker. Speed and accuracy. You need both or you need neither. The whistle blew. Rifles cracked almost in unison. beside her fired quickly, transitioning between targets with impressive rhythm. Others followed the same pattern, their shots echoing across the desert in a kind of violent chorus. Moved slower, she read the wind, adjusted for distance. Her shots were deliberate, methodical. One by one her bullets found center mass, not flashy, just perfect. The final whistle came before her last round left the barrel. She was still on her last target. "Cease fire." Silence followed, cleared her weapon, her chest tight. She knew what was coming before it came. Gunnery Sergeant walked the line, checking targets. He paused at hers. "Outstanding accuracy," he said, but his voice carried to everyone. "Too slow, failure." She'd shot better than most of them, but with his wide misses and rushed rhythm, had hit all required targets. He passed. The whispers began before they even left the range. "Told you she couldn't hack it. Filing papers doesn't make you a sniper. Guess she'll be polishing our rifles by next week." That night a folded sheet of paper waited on her cot, reassignment orders, immediate transfer to the base armory, no retests, no second chances. She sat on the edge of the cot, staring at the words that ended years of preparation. A career's worth of effort undone by 15 seconds. Appeared in the doorway, his voice thick with mock sympathy. "Hey, don't look so down. At least now you can clean our rifles proper. Try not to scratch mine when you're polishing it." His buddies laughed. Folded the orders carefully and slid them into her notebook. Not angrily, not with tears, just with a quiet steel hardening inside her. Because she knew something they didn't. Speed meant nothing if you missed the one shot that mattered. And though she didn't realize it yet, in a matter of months that lesson, her lesson, would decide whether 3 Marines lived or died. But for now she would be the ghost in the armory. The one they forgot about, the one they mocked, the one they didn't see coming. The desert outside her window stretched silent and endless. Tomorrow she would report for duty, not as a sniper candidate, but as something else entirely. And somewhere deep inside, she whispered a quiet vow: one day they'll understand. What happens to a soldier when her dream dies overnight? For the answer was silence. The next morning she reported to the armory, her orders folded neatly in her pocket. The cavernous room smelled of oil and steel, racks of rifles gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights. It was a place most Marines pass through without thought, drop off a weapon, sign a sheet, walk away. But now it was her world. Master Sergeant, the man in charge, was older, weathered, his hands bearing the stains of decades spent stripping weapons down to their smallest pieces. He didn't waste words. "So you're the sniper washout," he said, not cruelly, just as a fact. "Yes, Master Sergeant." He studied her a long moment, then, with the smallest shrug, handed her a clipboard. "Heard you shoot straight, just not fast enough for the young bucks. Maybe you'll learn something useful here. These rifles keep them alive, and most of them don't take care of their gear worth a damn." It wasn't praise, but it wasn't dismissal either. Worked, quietly, invisibly. She cleaned, calibrated, replaced worn parts. Her hands grew to know each rifle like a fingerprint. Where others saw identical weapons, she saw unique temperaments, slight trigger pulls, scopes that drifted, bolts that stuck under pressure. And she noticed something else: patterns. Reeves strutted in regularly, always with an entourage. "How's the cleaning, lady?" he'd say. "Make sure my scope's crystal clear, got a reputation to maintain." His laughter filled the room. His rifle, though, was never as pristine as he believed, poorly zeroed, feeding issues, sloppy maintenance. She fixed it every time, silently, never telling him that his scores weren't his alone. Page after page in her notebook grew with observations, not just ballistic data anymore, but rifle-specific notes. Reeves, trigger pull favors right under stress. Johnson, scope tracking error, long-range shots unreliable. She wasn't supposed to care, but she did. 3 weeks in showed her something that shifted everything. A secure terminal tucked in the back of the armory. Don't let this leave the room, he warned, logging her into the classified range data. The truth lived in numbers. The system didn't just track hits. It tracked precision, consistency, stress responses. And what it revealed cut through the golden boys weren't as golden as they seemed. Especially, his group spread wide under pressure. His accuracy plummeted in simulations where time limits and noise stacked stress. Leaned closer. Sir, these men aren't ready for combat. Exhaled, weary. I've been saying that for months, but the brass loves speed. Fast times sell. Fast kills look good in reports. Nobody wants to hear about precision when they can brag about efficiency. That night made a choice. She stayed late, cross-referencing rifle maintenance logs with performance data. Every malfunction, every shot deviation, every inconsistency. What she found was damning. The school wasn't producing snipers, it was producing liabilities. She documented it all, quietly, methodically, a report no one had asked her to write. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. A week later, Captain walked into the armory. It was unusual, he rarely left the range. His eyes swept the room before settling on her. He said, voice clipped, "We need to talk about some unusual activity in the range systems." Her heart thudded. "Sir, I've been checking performance data for maintenance." "That's not what I'm talking about." He stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "Someone been compiling unauthorized reports. Reports that undermine this program. That's above your clearance level." Before she could answer, interjected, "I authorized her access, Captain, for maintenance." Cut him off. "The problem, Master Sergeant, is not access. The problem is intent. Are you trying to tell me," his eyes locked on, "that you, a washout, think you're qualified to evaluate candidates who passed?" The air felt heavy, pressing against her chest. But instead of backing down, something in her hardened. "Sir," she said steadily, "if you've read my reports, then you know what I found. Some of these men can't perform when it matters most. The data proves it." The silence stretched. Face tightened, fury flashing beneath the surface. But behind his anger was something else. Uncertainty. "You're walking a dangerous line," he said finally, his tone low, controlled. "Focus on your assigned duties. Stop playing instructor." He turned sharply and left, his boots striking hard against the concrete floor. Rested a heavy hand on her shoulder after the door shut. "You've got guts, but doesn't take well to being challenged, especially not by someone the program already wrote off. Be careful." She nodded, but careful wasn't enough anymore. Because she had spent her whole career being underestimated, and she wasn't about to stop now. What didn't know was that someone else had been listening. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah, the newly arrived base commander, had been conducting an informal inspection when she overheard the confrontation. Later, behind a closed office door, she read reports. "Are these numbers accurate?" she asked, her eyes sharp. "Yes, ma'am," he admitted reluctantly. "'S thorough. She's identified real issues with candidate readiness." Studied the pages for a long time. Reeves, 40% drop in precision under combat simulation, and he's one of the top candidates. "That's correct, ma'am." "Then why are they still in the program?" "That's above my pay grade." Closed the folder, her jaw tightening. Decisions turned in her mind, decisions that would reach far beyond one dismissed candidate. The very next day, she walked into the armory, was bent over a rifle, making minute adjustments to a scope mount, stood silently for a moment, watching the deliberate, careful work. She said finally, looked up startled, "Ma'am, I've reviewed your reports. Show me what you mean, precision under pressure." And for the first time since arriving at Camp Leatherneck, felt something stir inside her, hope. For an hour, she laid it all out. The difference between range success and battlefield readiness. The cracks in the system masked by time trials. The evidence buried in rifles that came back damaged from rushed manipulations. Real shots don't come with countdown timers, said quietly. They come with consequences. Listened, really listened. Then she gave an order that changed everything. From this point forward, you report directly to me. Continue your analysis. Document everything. The shift was seismic. Suddenly had access not just to rifles and maintenance logs but to records, data, archives. Captain seethed, but he couldn't challenge the base commander openly. Sneered when he saw her in briefings, mocking her friends in high places. But none of that mattered. She was no longer just the ghost in the armory. She was exposing the truth. And the truth was brutal. Her report grew into something undeniable. The sniper school's obsession with speed was creating a dangerous illusion. On paper, the Marines were excelling. In real combat, they would fail. Some already had. Buried in the archives, uncovered deployment records, top graduates who had missed critical shots in Afghanistan, Iraq, men who had been wounded, men who had died. She called it precision versus speed, a combat readiness analysis. And just as she prepared to submit it, the base erupted in preparation for a high-profile visit. A convoy rolled through the gates, general, Pentagon officials, media crews. They were here to showcase the sniper program's efficiency revolution. A public demonstration. Perfect conditions, hand-picked shooters, rehearsed success. From the armory window, watched Reeves swagger before the cameras, firing rapid, flawless strings. The general nodded approvingly. Remarkable improvement. We're producing combat-ready snipers in half the traditional time. Clenched her fists. The truth lay hidden, buried in her notebook, in the data files, in the rifles she had rebuilt. The truth no one wanted to hear. And then something happened, something no one had planned. A target system malfunctioned. A 600-meter pop-up activated instead of a 300. And beyond that target, invisible from the stands, a maintenance crew worked in the dirt. Through her spotting scope, saw it unfold in slow motion. A candidate lined up, unaware that his target had living men just meters behind it. His finger tightened on the trigger. Had 3 seconds. Her voice cracked the air like gunfire itself. Cease fire, personnel downrange. The shot fired anyway, kicking up dirt meters from the workers who dove for cover in terror. Chaos erupted. The general's entourage turned. Officers shouted. And standing in the middle of it all was the woman dismissed as too slow, who had just prevented a friendly fire tragedy. How does a single voice cut through the chaos of rifles, smoke, and commands? Sometimes it doesn't matter who speaks, only that someone does. Shout echoed across the range. Cease fire, personnel downrange. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the bullet struck dirt just meters from the unsuspecting maintenance crew. The men scattered, scrambling for cover, realizing only now how close death had come. Silence followed, heavy and unnatural. Even the dust seemed to hang in the air. Captain stormed toward her, rage etched into every line of his face. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Sir, there are personnel downrange," answered firmly, pointing toward the men who were now waving frantically from behind a barrier. Target system malfunction put them in the line of fire. Opened his mouth to retort, but another voice cut through the moment, commanding, undeniable. "Who authorized maintenance during a live fire demonstration?" Lieutenant Colonel. She had appeared at side, her expression sharp, assessing. The kind of leader who didn't ask questions unless she already suspected the answers. Faltered, "Ma'am, that area wasn't supposed to be active today." "The target system malfunctioned," finished for him. "I saw it from the armory. 600-meter target activated instead of 3. The general himself had arrived now, his entourage close behind. Major General, his voice was low but dangerous. "You're telling me this demonstration almost ended in a friendly fire incident?" "Yes, sir," replied, still at attention though her pulse hammered in her throat. The range shut down immediately. The media crew was escorted away. Investigators swarmed the site. The maintenance team was debriefed, pale and shaken. And in the middle of the storm, stood, torn between fear of the consequences and the quiet certainty she had done the only thing she could. Hours later called her into her office. No ceremony, no small talk, just urgency. I need your full report on my desk in 1 hour. Everything you've documented, your analysis, your observations, today's incident. This program just showed its cracks in front of a general and half the Pentagon. Saluted, yes, ma'am. By dawn, the report lay on his desk, thick, detailed, impossible to dismiss. 3 days later, sat across from General himself. The weight of the moment pressed down on her shoulders, but she kept her eyes level. Beside the general sat. In the corner, Captain, his posture stiff, his jaw tight, his dislike of her radiating like heat. Flipped through the pages, sticky notes marking critical sections. He finally looked up. According to your analysis, specialist, our obsession with speed has created a dangerous gap in training methodology. Yes, sir. Her voice was steady. The data shows a direct correlation. Fast times on the range mean poor precision under real stress. Men who excel here are failing in combat. Couldn't stay silent. General, with respect, failed our qualification standards. Her conclusions may be colored by personal bias. His gaze snapped to him, hard as stone. Captain, 3 days ago I watched this Marine prevent a fatal incident because she was the only one paying attention to safety instead of speed. That suggests your standards might be measuring the wrong things. The words struck like hammer blows. For everyone who had dismissed her. The general rose, packing slowly. Effective immediately, this program will change. 1. Current candidates will undergo additional evaluations focused on precision under stress. 2. The curriculum will be redesigned to balance speed with judgment. And 3. He stopped, turning to. Specialist will be reinstated as a sniper candidate and will assist in developing new training protocols. The air left the room. Felt her knees threaten to buckle, but she held herself steady. Sir, she began cautiously, I appreciate the confidence, but— No buts, interrupted. You've demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment this Corps needs. The question is, are you willing to help us fix this program? For a long moment she couldn't speak. Every humiliation, every whispered paper pusher, every night alone with only her notebook for company, all of it pressed into this single point in time. Yes, sir, she said at last, I'm willing. After the meeting approached her. His voice was carefully measured, his expression strained. It seems I owe you an apology. Your methods, your approach, I may have been too quick to judge. It wasn't warm, it wasn't even kind, but from it was monumental. Came next. His swagger was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar, humility. He scratched the back of his neck, eyes averted. That call you made, spotting the danger running onto a hot range, I'm not sure I would seen it, not with everything else going on. Studied him for a moment, seeing cracks in the armor he wore so loudly. She answered simply, you could learn too, if you're willing to slow down long enough to see what matters. That night back in the armory, she cleaned her rifle again. The sound of the brush against steel was steady, grounding. Tomorrow she would return to the range, not as an outsider, not as a washout, but as both student and instructor. The woman they had called too slow, too precise, too methodical was about to reshape the very system that had rejected her. What she couldn't know was how quickly her new convictions would be tested. 3 weeks later, orders arrived. Deployment. A Taliban cell identified near a village in Helmand province. A major attack suspected. A scout sniper team needed. Her name was on the roster. So was. As they loaded their gear onto the transport helicopter, leaned close, the old smirk fighting its way back. Try to keep up. This isn't the practice range anymore. Didn't answer. She checked her rifle one last time, perfectly zeroed. Her notebook filled with fresh ballistic data tucked into her pack. The helicopter lifted off, rotors thundering. The desert stretched beneath them. For the first time in her life, she felt both fear and belonging braided together. This was no longer training, no longer theory. This was the test she had been fighting toward all along. What does fear sound like when no one dares admit it? On the helicopter ride into Helmand Province, it sounded like silence. 4 Marines packed shoulder to shoulder, their gear pressing against their bodies, their rifles balanced carefully across their laps. Only the rotors spoke, the rhythmic thump pounding against bone and thought alike. Staff Sergeant Miller, the team leader, checked his map again. A veteran of 3 deployments, his presence carried the steady gravity of someone who had walked this ground before. Next to him, the youngest of the group, adjusted the strap of the M240 he'd been assigned. Then there was Reeves, eyes shut as if sleeping, though his fingers tapped against the receiver of his rifle in restless rhythm. And sat perfectly still, hands folded over her notebook, eyes closed. She wasn't asleep. She was running numbers in her head. Elevation, distance, drift. Every variable she could control, she rehearsed. Every variable she couldn't, she braced against. The mission sounded simple on paper. Establish an observation post overlooking a small village. Monitor activity for 72 hours. Confirm or deny the presence of a Taliban leader. Call in and if confirmed. Engage directly only in self-defense or to prevent civilian deaths. But missions rarely stayed on paper. Miller shouted over the roar of the helicopter, "You're my spotter this time." Looked up, startled. She hadn't expected that level of trust so soon. "Yes, Staff Sergeant." Cracked one eye open. "Guess that makes me's babysitter. Try not to slow us down." Ignored him. The rotors thundered louder. Then the helicopter banked hard, dropping altitude. The red light over the door flicked on. 2 minutes, the crew chief yelled. Felt calm slide into her veins, the same calm that had carried her on the range. But under it was something else, a whisper of doubt. Would her precision matter out here, or would she falter again, too slow when speed was demanded? The helicopter touched down on a barren stretch of desert. Dust swirled in violent clouds as they jumped out, packs heavy, rifles slung tight. In seconds, the aircraft lifted away, leaving them in silence. 15 kilometers to the objective, on foot. The night was their ally. Darkness covered their approach, the stars sharp and cold overhead. They moved in staggered formation, each carrying 60 pounds of gear. The ground was treacherous, scree that shifted underfoot, gullies hidden until you stumbled into them, thorny bushes that clawed at uniforms. By dawn, they had covered 12 kilometers. Their bodies screamed for rest. Miller halted them with a raised hand, consulting his GPS. 2 clicks out. We'll hole up in that draw until dusk. Move to the final position under cover of darkness. The hours that followed dragged on in suffocating heat. They lay low, conserving water, conserving strength. Used her spotting scope to study the terrain. The village lay quiet below, dust-colored homes clustered like bones. She marked possible escape routes, likely guard positions, terrain features that could either kill them or save them. Broke the silence once, his voice lower than usual. "You really take notes on everything, don't you?" "Details matter," replied without looking up. "Sometimes the smallest thing makes the difference between coming home or not." He didn't laugh, he didn't answer at all. By dusk, Miller gave the signal to move. The final approach took 3 hours of crawling through drainage ditches, freezing when vehicles rumbled past on the road below, weaving around dogs that sniffed the night air. Finally, they reached their position, a rocky outcrop overlooking the village. Perfect concealment, perfect. "Now we wait," Miller whispered, settling behind his rifle. 72 hours, watching, listening, waiting. The first day passed without incident. Children played in dusty courtyards, farmers worked fields, women gathered at the well, normal life in the shadow of war. The second day noticed a change. fewer children outside, men loitering at corners standing watch instead of working. She recorded it all. "Something's different," she whispered. Miller peered through his scope. "Good eye, pass it to Reeves and tell them to watch for night movement." That night their patience was rewarded. 3 vehicles slipped into the village, headlights off. Men with rifles spilled out, moving quickly into buildings. "Targets confirmed," Miller whispered into his radio. "Multiple armed individuals, matches intelligence profile." "Headquarters acknowledged. Hold position. Maintain surveillance. Await further orders." The third day brought more vehicles, more men, more movement. Through her scope, saw maps spread across tables inside a central building, men gesturing urgently. "They're planning something," she murmured, "within 24 to 48 hours." Miller nodded, impressed. "We need to ID the leadership, then we'll get the green light." Late that afternoon, their break came. A vehicle rolled in, flanked by 2 guards. The man who stepped out commanded immediate respect. Others deferred to him without a word. "That's," Miller whispered, "on the high-value target list, confirmation secured." He related, strike scheduled for 200 hours. Their job, watch, confirm, extract. But dusk brought unease. Noticed something new. Men with rifles establishing guard positions on the village perimeter. Not casual, intentional. "Miller," she whispered, "they know." The words had barely left her mouth when the first shot cracked the air. A puff of dust erupted inches from her position. They'd been spotted. "Fall back," Miller shouted. He reached for the radio, then jerked violently as a round punched through the seam of his body armor. He collapsed, blood spreading across his chest. Dragged him behind a boulder, checking the wound. Serious. Not instantly fatal, but time was against them. "Reeves," she radioed. "Miller's hit. Need covering fire to fall back." Roger's voice came back tight with tension. "We're moving." The enemy pressed the slope, using darkness and terrain. Shadows with rifles closing fast. Miller tried to rise, his face pale. "I can move." "No," hissed, "not fast enough." She made a choice before fear could argue. She grabbed her rifle, extra ammunition, and keyed her radio. "Reeves, I'm drawing fire. Get Miller out." "That's suicide, at least 15 of them." "Just be ready." She moved before he could protest. Flanking wide, using the terrain she'd memorized, she found an angle. The first shot dropped a fighter. Before they could locate her, she was gone, shifting to another position. Another shot. Another move. She became a phantom in the dark, trading safety for seconds of distraction. The valley erupted with muzzle flashes, enemy fire raking her last known position. She fired again, then moved. On the radio, "Miller's with us, fall back now." His voice strained but alive. She began to move toward them. Then it happened. A bullet slammed into her leg with devastating force. The impact spun her, hurled her down a rocky slope. She hit hard, the world exploding into white-hot pain. She knew instantly, the femur. Shattered. Her breath came in ragged gasps, vision tunneling. Bullets struck around her, closer, closer. The enemy knew roughly where she was. They would be on her in minutes. 3 kilometers separated her from her team. 3 kilometers with a leg destroyed beyond use. She keyed her radio, every word forced through clenched teeth. "I'm hit. Femur shattered. Don't come for me. Too hot. Complete extraction with Miller." "We're not leaving you," his voice raw. "That's an order," she growled. "Miller needs medevac. Complete the mission. I'll find my own way." Silence. Then reluctantly, "Understood. QRF inbound as soon as weather clears. Hold on." But knew the truth. Quick reaction forces wouldn't arrive in time. By then the Taliban would find her, capture her, end her. There was only one chance, one path. She pulled her tourniquet tight above the wound, pain ripping through her like fire. Injected morphine into her thigh with trembling hands. The pain dulled, but only slightly. She forced herself forward, inch by inch. dragging her broken body across the Afghan rock. 600 meters to a dry riverbed. Cover, concealment, hope. Every movement sent fresh agony screaming through her. The leg was useless. Shards of bone tore muscle with each drag. Blood left a faint trail behind her. And behind her the enemy closed in. Their voices echoed in the dark. Dogs barked, hunters following blood. But had spent her whole life being told what she couldn't do, and every time she had proven them wrong. 1 meter at a time, one breath at a time, one life hers against the weight of everything. She crawled. How far can a human body go after it's already broken? Asked herself that with every drag forward, every inch gained across the jagged Afghan earth. 600 meters separated her from the dry riverbed. 600 meters might as well have been 600 miles. Her shattered femur pulsed with fire. The morphine dulled the edges but couldn't erase the truth. Every movement sent shockwaves of pain through her body. Her hands clutched dirt, pulled, pushed. She bit her lip until it bled just to keep silent. The night air was cool against her sweat-soaked face. Overhead, the stars shone with an indifference that mocked her suffering. Somewhere behind, voices shouted in Pashto. Flashlights danced like angry fireflies across the slope. Dogs barked. They were hunting her. Forced her breathing shallow. Every sound carried in the desert. One gasp too loud and they'd lock on her trail. She dragged herself another meter. Rocks shredded her palms. Her elbows bled. Her broken leg trailed behind her like dead weight, catching on stone, snagging on scrub. She dared not scream. The only sound she allowed herself was the faint scrape of her gear sliding across gravel. 100 meters in, she risked a glance back. Shapes moved along the silhouettes against the stars, closer now. Their shouts grew sharper, urgent. They had found her blood trail. Her pulse hammered, faster. She pulled herself forward, lungs burning. At one point, her hand landed on something sharp. A shard of shale split her palm wide. She clenched her fist around it anyway, blood slicking her fingers. Pain was irrelevant now. 200 meters. Her vision blurred. Dehydration clawed at her. She reached for her canteen, twisted it open with trembling hands, and let a single sip touch her lips before forcing herself onward. Every ounce counted. The dogs barked louder, closer. She could hear their paws scattering gravel, hear handlers urging them forward. Rolled onto her side, pulling her rifle across her chest. Through the scope, she found one silhouette. One handler, illuminated by his own flashlight beam. She exhaled, steady despite the pain, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, the handler dropped. The dog veered, confused. Shouts erupted. Muzzle flashes sparked across the night, bullets striking rock around her. She rolled, dragged herself downslope, body screaming in protest. 300 meters. Halfway. But the voices were closer now. 10 men, maybe more, hunting her like game. Pressed herself flat, forcing her body beneath a low outcropping. She lay still, listening, heart pounding. Boots crunched gravel above her. A flashlight beam swept across the rocks just meters from her hiding place. She pressed dirt into her bleeding palm, willing herself into silence. One breath, another. The men moved on. Their shouts grew faint. She waited 5 full minutes before moving again. Every second stretched eternity. Finally, she dragged herself out from under the rocks, back into the open ground. 400 meters. Her arms trembled with fatigue. Her body begged her to stop, but stopping meant capture. Capture meant worse than death. She thought of Miller, bleeding but alive because she had drawn fire. She thought of and hauling him out toward safety. She thought of the maintenance crew who had lived because she'd shouted on the range. Precision with purpose. She clenched her jaw, pulled herself forward. 500 meters. Her leg caught on a boulder. The motion ripped something deep inside, white-hot agony flooding her. Darkness crowded her vision. She nearly blacked out. She lay still, trembling, biting her lip until she tasted iron. "Move," she whispered to herself. "Just move." Her grandfather's voice rose in memory, gentle and steady. "Patience. One shot. One chance. Never rush, never stop." She pulled herself again. Another meter, another. The voices rose once more behind her. They had found her trail again. The dogs barked, furious, snapping at the night air. 600 meters felt impossibly far, but then finally the ground dipped. The outline of the riverbed appeared, shelter, concealment, salvation. But she wasn't there yet. At 570 meters, a flashlight beam locked onto her. Shouts erupted. Bullets struck stone around her, shards stinging her skin. Dragged herself into position, rifle braced against a rock. Through her blurred scope she saw them, 3 figures charging down the slope. Too close, too fast. She inhaled, exhaled. The world narrowed to a single line, a single breath. The first shot dropped the lead fighter. She shifted, fired again. The second fell. The third dove for cover, firing blindly. She rolled, dragged herself another 10 meters. Pain tore through her leg. Her vision swam. 590 meters. The slope grew steeper. She slid the last few meters, tumbling into the riverbed. The impact drove the breath from her lungs, but the concealment wrapped her like a cloak. High walls of dirt and stone, shadow, cover. She crawled into the deepest cut she could find, pressing herself against the earth. Her body convulsed with exhaustion. She tightened her tourniquet again, sobbing through clenched teeth as the pain exploded fresh. 600 meters. She had made it. But she wasn't safe, not yet. Above, the Taliban voices grew louder. They scanned the slope, flashlights sweeping. One man pointed into the riverbed. Another shouted orders. They were coming. Checked her magazine. 3 rounds left. That was all. Her hands trembled as she reloaded, as she steadied her scope on the edge of the riverbed. Every muscle screamed for rest. Every nerve begged her to let go, but she couldn't, not yet. She whispered into her radio, voice weak but steady. "This is position compromised. Enemy closing. If you hear nothing more, tell my family I didn't quit." Static, no response. Too much interference, too much distance. Her hand pressed against her notebook, tucked against her chest. Pages filled with calculations, corrections, lessons. Pages no one else had cared about. Pages that had brought her here, alive, against impossible odds. She smiled faintly through the pain. "Precision with purpose," she whispered. The enemy closed in. What happens when courage runs out? But the fight isn't over. Lay pressed into the dirt of the riverbed, her broken body trembling, her rifle steady only because she forced it to be. The pain in her leg had become something beyond fire. It was ice now. Cold, consuming. Her hands shook from blood loss, but her breathing stayed calm. Years of training had carved that reflex into her. Above her, enemy voices shouted orders. Flashlight beams cut across the darkness, sweeping, searching. The scrape of boots on stone grew louder. They were coming for her. She checked her magazine again. 3 rounds, that was it. Her world had shrunk to 3 chances, 3 breaths. The first silhouette appeared at the rim of the riverbed. A man leaned forward, rifle ready, scanning the shadows. Exhaled, the motion controlled despite the agony tearing through her. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The shot cracked, the man fell. Chaos followed. Shouts, urgent and sharp. 2 more silhouettes appeared, flashlights blazing down into the cut where she hid. Bullets raked dirt, stone exploding inches from her. She rolled deeper into shadow, bracing against another wall. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, steady rhythm. Patience, 1 shot, 1 chance. The second man leaned too far, beam sweeping directly across her. His eyes widened too late. Her shot punched through his chest, cutting his shout in half. 2 rounds left. She adjusted position, dragging her useless leg with gritted teeth, smearing blood across the ground. Her heart thundered, but her breathing stayed measured, steady. Another silhouette appeared, but this one didn't lean too far. He crouched low, careful, smarter. His flashlight beam swept methodically, narrowing in. Sighted on the glow, waited for the shift. Just as she squeezed the trigger, a sudden burst of fire erupted from the opposite rim of the riverbed. Muzzle flashes everywhere. Bullets cut the air over her head. More had arrived, 5, maybe 6, maybe more. Her shot missed. The man ducked back, shouting, rallying the others. Boots thundered against rock. She heard one voice louder than the rest, commanding, organizing. They weren't reckless now. They were tightening the noose. Her rifle clattered empty. 2 rounds remained in the magazine pouch on her vest. She jammed one in with trembling hands, her breath sharp with effort. Above, a dog barked, closer this time. Savage, hungry, its handler urged it forward. Pulse pounded, her vision blurred. She forced herself to focus through the scope. The beam of the flashlight, the shape of the handler's body, one shot. She fired, the handler dropped. The dog yelped, confused, veering into the night. 1 round left. Then silence, a silence heavier than all the shouting before. They were regrouping, planning. Pressed her back into the dirt wall, forcing herself still. Her hands shook uncontrollably now. Her body begged for unconsciousness, but she wouldn't let it. Not yet. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds, time warped under pain and fear. Then a voice, close, speaking in broken English. "American, you are finished. Drop rifle, we take you alive." Her stomach turned cold. Capture, interrogation, propaganda video, she knew exactly what that meant. She gripped her rifle. Alive wasn't an option, not in their hands. The voice came again. "Drop rifle, American, we give you life." Her lips trembled. She whispered to herself, barely audible. Better to crawl, better to fight, better to end it here than be used. The world narrowed to her last bullet. She steadied the scope, sighting on the next silhouette that rose above the rim. The man thought she was broken, thought she was done. He leaned forward, rifle loose, careless. Her final round dropped him. The crack of the shot echoed down the riverbed, final and absolute. Then her rifle clicked empty. The silence after was crushing. She lay still, chest heaving, her weapon now useless. She reached for her sidearm with shaking fingers. 8 rounds there. Not much, but enough. Enough to make sure she didn't fall into their hands. Above, the voices grew angry, furious. They had lost too many men to a single wounded Marine, but they knew now she was nearly spent. They would close in carefully, methodically. Strength ebbed, her vision dimmed. She pressed her hand against her notebook, tucked into her vest. If they find me, she thought, maybe they'll find this too. Maybe they'll see the truth. She whispered into the radio again, voice faint. "This is position compromised, low on ammo. If anyone can hear me, tell them precision mattered. Tell them." Static, no reply. Her eyelids drooped. She forced them open. Again, again. She couldn't stop, not yet. Then something changed. A distant rumble, a sound she almost didn't believe at first. Helicopter rotors, low, heavy, growing louder. Her heart surged. QRF, quick reaction force. They made it. Above, the Taliban shouted in alarm. The dog barked wildly. The beam of flashlights scattered, searching skyward. Forced her head up. Through blurred eyes, she saw the faint outline of a Black Hawk sweeping low, side gunners opening fire. The night exploded with tracers, dirt erupting where enemy fighters had stood. Shouts turned to screams. She wanted to cheer, wanted to cry, but all she could do was lay her head back against the dirt, tears streaking her face. Boots pounded into the riverbed, American voices this time, urgent, strong. "Marine down, femur fracture, heavy blood loss, get her on the litter now." Hands lifted her, straps tightened around her body. A needle pierced her arm, IV fluids. Someone pressed bandages tight against her shattered leg. "Hang on, you're safe now, we've got you." She wanted to answer, wanted to tell them she wasn't safe, not really, not yet. That safety was an illusion, always fragile, but the words wouldn't come. Darkness surged forward, pulling her under. The last thing she felt was motion, the litter rising, the thump of rotor blades, the sky carrying her away. What does survival feel like when the body is broken, but the soul is still at war? Woke in fragments. First the sound of monitors beeping in rhythm with her pulse. Then the antiseptic sting of hospital air. Finally, the weight, not physical but crushing all the same, of realizing she was alive. Her eyes opened slowly, white ceiling tiles, a fluorescent light humming faintly, the edges of her vision blurred. She tried to shift, but pain flared instantly. Her leg, she remembered. Her femur shattered. The memory rushed back: bullets, dirt, blood, the crawl, the riverbed, the last bullet, the rotors overhead. Her chest heaved, breaths sharp and shallow. She gripped the sheets in both fists, trying to anchor herself. A voice cut through the storm, calm, familiar. "You're safe, breathe." She turned her head. Lieutenant Colonel sat beside the bed, uniform pressed, expression unreadable. Swallowed hard, her throat dry, her voice cracked. "Where am I?" "Germany, you've been here 3 days," tone softened. "You're stable now, surgery was successful, they had to place a titanium rod, recovery won't be easy, but you'll walk again." Blinked, fighting tears. Walk again. The words should have been relief, but all she could think was, what about my team? Her voice trembled. "Miller, Reeves." Nodded slowly. They made it out. Miller's recovering at Walter Reed. Reeves and are already back in theater. Relief hit her like a wave, so strong it made her dizzy. They'd lived, all three. But under the relief was something darker. "They carried Miller out because I stayed behind," she whispered. "I told them to leave me. I thought," her throat tightened, "I thought I was dead." "You gave them time," said firmly. "You drew fire away. You made choices that saved 3 Marines. Don't ever forget that." Closed her eyes, but words couldn't quiet the storm inside. She saw their faces, their fear, their blood. She felt again the agony of crawling, the bone grinding inside her leg, the taste of dirt in her mouth. That night alone in the sterile room she broke. Silent sobs shook her. The sheets grew damp under her face. She buried her cries into the pillow, ashamed of the sound. She had survived. She had saved them, but the weight was unbearable. Days blurred into weeks. Physical therapy began. First, the smallest movements, sitting upright, flexing toes, lifting her leg a fraction. Each session left her drenched in sweat, shaking with exhaustion. The therapists were relentless. She was relentless back. But at night, when the lights dimmed and the ward grew quiet, the war returned. The riverbed, the voices shouting in Pashto, the dog barking, the flashlight beam sweeping toward her. She would wake gasping, drenched in sweat, heart racing as if she were still hunted. Nurses offered medication to dull the nightmares. She refused. She wanted to remember, needed to. Visitors came, doctors, a representative from the command. They spoke of bravery, of commendations, of what she had done. She listened, polite, but their words slid off her. One day, weeks into recovery, Reeves appeared at her door. He looked different, thinner, paler. His eyes carried shadows she hadn't seen before. He stood awkwardly at the threshold. "Permission to come in." She almost laughed at the formality. "It's a hospital room, Reeves, not a bunker." He stepped inside, holding a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the table beside her bed. "I wrote something, figured you should read it, when you're ready." She frowned. "What is it?" "A statement for your medal package." He scratched at his jaw. "They're putting you up for the Silver Star, maybe more. You don't have to want it, but you deserve it." Her stomach tightened. "I don't want a medal." Reeves looked at her sharply. "You saved our lives, Miller. Mine, you bought us time we didn't have. If you don't want it for yourself, fine, but do it for us, for the record, for history." She looked away. Outside the window, clouds drifted across a pale European sky. Reeves's voice softened. I used to call you paper pusher, treated you like you didn't belong. I was wrong. You belonged more than any of us. Her throat tightened. She forced herself to meet his eyes. For the first time there was no mockery there, only truth. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once stiffly, then left without another word. Later, when she unfolded the paper, her hands trembled. Reeves's handwriting sprawled across the page, messy but legible. He had written every detail of her crawl, her defiance, her last stand. He had called her a Marine who embodied precision with purpose. Her own words, the ones she had written in notebooks no one ever cared to read. Tears blurred the page. She pressed it against her chest and let herself cry, not from pain this time, but from something deeper, recognition. As weeks passed, her strength returned slowly. She learned to walk again, first with crutches, then with a cane. Each step was agony. Each step was defiance. But the leg wasn't the only wound. At night, the nightmare stayed. During therapy, her hands sometimes shook, flashes of memory stealing her focus. One afternoon, a doctor asked her gently, "Do you think about going back?" She froze. Going back, Afghanistan, though the mission unfinished. She wanted to say no, that she'd had enough, that she was done. Instead, she heard herself whisper, yes. Because deep down she knew something. Surviving wasn't enough, not for her, not for what she carried. Sometimes, the war outside doesn't end until you face the war inside. And wasn't finished yet. What happens when the war finally ends, but the battle inside does? Stood at the edge of the parade ground, cane in one hand, dress uniform pressed sharp despite the weight of her limp. Rows of Marines stood at attention. The air smelled faintly of polish and dust, the kind of ceremonial stillness that only military tradition could create. The general's voice carried across the field. He spoke of bravery, of sacrifice, of a Marine who had refused to quit even when her body had been shattered. A citation was read aloud, her name echoed in syllables heavy with formality. The medal gleamed in the sun as it was pinned to her chest. Applause rose, respectful and solemn. Cameras clicked. Her photo would appear in newsletters, in headlines, in the footnotes of history. But didn't hear the words, didn't feel the weight of the medal. She was back in the riverbed, dirt in her mouth, blood on her hands, the silence between gunshots louder than anything here. Her fingers brushed the medal absently, but her eyes stayed on the horizon. After the ceremony, Marines crowded her, offering congratulations. Reeves stood among them, quieter now, different. He caught her eye, gave a small nod. She returned it, nothing more. Words weren't necessary anymore. They had been forged in the same fire. That evening she walked alone across base, cane tapping softly against pavement. The sun dipped low, painting the world in orange and gold. For the first time she let herself stop, sit, breathe. She pulled her notebook from her pocket, the same one she had carried through the crawl, pages torn, smudged with blood. She flipped it open to the first entry she had ever written as a candidate. Precise notes about wind drift, angles, calculations. But between the numbers, she had written something else once, a line she had almost forgotten. Every shot is a choice. Every choice leaves a mark, some you see, some you don't. She closed the book, hands trembling. That was the truth of it. Her crawl had left marks on her body, but also on her soul, on the men she saved, on the enemy who had hunted her, on the silence she would carry forever. The weeks that followed were slower. Therapy sessions, speeches she didn't want to give, interviews she endured with polite, guarded answers. People called her a hero. She smiled, nodded, and went back to her room. At night the war still came. She still woke gasping, still pressed her hands against the sheets as if clawing dirt. But each time she reminded herself, I made it through once. I can make it through again. Months later she returned home. The air smelled different there, softer, warmer. Her family embraced her, tears shining in their eyes. Neighbors placed flags in their yards. People shook her hand at the grocery store. But when the noise faded, when the crowds thinned, she sat alone in her childhood room and stared at the walls. They were covered in old medals, trophies from school. None of them mattered now. She took her notebook from her bag, placed it on the desk. She began to write again. Not numbers this time, not calculations, stories, memories, not for medals, not for command, for herself, for the record. Weeks later, a letter arrived, from Short Direct. The Corps will move on, the program will change, but some things must be remembered or we repeat them. I hope you keep writing. Your words matter as much as your actions. Read the letter twice, then set it beside the notebook. The world outside kept turning. Wars continued. Names shifted. Uniforms changed. But she knew she had left something behind, not just blood, not just pain, a lesson. That precision matters. That patience saves. That sometimes the slowest crawl can carry the heaviest weight. One evening, months into recovery, she walked alone down a quiet road near her home. Her cane tapped in rhythm with her steps. Children played in the distance. The sky burned orange again. She paused, letting the breeze brush against her face, closed her eyes, listened. The war was still there inside her, it always would be, but so was something else, something steadier, stronger. She opened her eyes and whispered, as if to herself, as if to the world. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And then she walked on, steady, each step an answer to the question no one had asked out loud. What does it mean to survive? It means to keep moving, even when the crawl never ends.